Hi, welcome back to ASD A New Perspective, the podcast show where we help you understand what is going on in the mind of your child, and we do encourage you that growth for your child is possible. I'm Kat Lee, and we also appreciate you for joining us for this special series, The Concerns of Parents. And in our podcast today, we talk about the essential role of parents in a child's life. Parents are essential. And as Dr. Gutstein explains, research backs that up.
People always want to know, is there literature supporting RDI? And I say, well, do you mean literature that supports the essential nature of the guiding relationship? And, that's part of that literature, right? And the essential role of parents in mental and self-development, and the essential role of that guiding relationship in the specific areas of impairment that are universal to people with autism. And the answer is, it's a huge literature. I have it, but I don't know how to share that. I mean, just giving people a bunch of papers isn't going to do much, or references. But, eventually we want to do that. But at this point, I think it is important for people to understand that conceptually, right? That not to read all the papers. I don't think you'd want to, but to understand conceptually that that's a fundamental premise of psychology, of developmental psychology, of neurology, of pediatric neurology, and yet it doesn't get discussed in autism, and it still doesn't, because you see all these papers on for instance, theory of mind impairments, and there's been a debate about that, but at this point, the consensus is back to, yes, they do have theory of mind impairments. You just don't necessarily always see it in these laboratory tests, but when you look in the naturalistic real world issues of understanding their own minds and others, and able to understand their own mental states, their own feelings, their own beliefs, ideas, sense of uncertainty, and others, that it's a dramatic impairment for people with ASD. But you look at the literature and say, well, how does this develop? And the literature is very clear. It develops through what parents do in their guiding. And there's some very specific things that are discussed in terms of how children learn to internalize, through dialogue with parents, through play with parents specifically, how they learn to internalize this and how they learn to develop this. So you look at another area, executive functioning, which has become a very hot area in autism in terms of the impairment of flexibility and working memory. Same thing. You see an enormous literature on how parents are essential, that parent guiding is essential. You look at self-directed communication, private speech, and self-dialogue, which is essential in any kind of higher level thinking, reading, learning from someone trying to instruct you or explain to you, self-regulation. It's essential for all those things and many more things. And again, the literature is huge. And so you say, well, if these are the impairments that are going to be plaguing people with ASD, keeping them from having a life, we have to provide the means for them to develop it. And it's sort of like, I don't know how we get that across, but to me, that's part of the understanding. That's sort of the beginning premise, isn't it? That we start with, is that it's not something we make up. I mean, I think that, all right, one difference is when you think about some of these other programs, they just make up these methods and they say, well, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And all we're saying is that this is the way, in terms of what science has found, or the way we understand child development, this is an essential role of parents and parenting figures, primary caregivers in development, that research is showing is not occurring in autism. That's what stands out. And so we're struggling to help you to find ways for parents of children with autism to provide this for their children. Because if they don't provide this for their children, then there's no way for the children to develop these critical abilities and motivations and mental processes that are essential to have a quality of life that research shows that they don't develop. And I don't know how you say that in a way that maybe people have trouble saying it in a way that's clear or understanding it or succinct. But once you do that, then the relationship then between the consultant and the parent is, how do I guide you to be able to prepare to have this relationship? And when people say, well, parents want me to tell them what to do with their kid, just what to do, what they do, then that part's obviously been missing, right? That they don't see the parent is not seeing the consultant as their primary guide to internalize, to develop this process, to have the ability to form a guiding relationship with their child. They're missing that piece, right? And you can't really go on because they're missing that piece. They really don't understand something there. They don't understand autism, which is one thing, and they don't understand the guiding relationship and how those two get connected. And what we're offering is so much more important than a method or some techniques or activities. It's the ability to have this guiding relationship with your child that otherwise you're not going to have. And every parent that understands that and gets it moves ahead. And every parent that doesn't understand and gets it doesn't move ahead. I mean, to me, it's right. I've seen that over and over again. If you don't get it, this whole thing doesn't make sense. If you get it, then it makes sense. And so, in terms of working with your family, I think that's the key. If all the resistances I hear people keep mentioning are parents who don't get it. They get the idea that, oh, what you're trying to provide for me is a way for me to think, to use my mind. I have to internalize this habits, right? Mindsets, the way to use my mind so that I can actually provide a guiding relationship for my child. And that covers all these areas of development, all these foundations, as well as, actual dynamic intelligence development. That if I can do that, then I open the door to all those things. If I can't do that, then the door is closed. And the child's development is going to be constrained dramatically. No matter what else I do, whatever therapies I do, whatever else I do, it's going to be constrained. Again, and what's the scientific basis for it? Well, the scientific basis is, there's a complete consensus in science about the importance of a guiding relationship. There's hundreds and hundreds of papers and articles and chapters, and you ask any expert. And B, there's now a good literature about how that never develops in infants who go on to be diagnosed with autism. Aside from being sort of anecdotally self-evident, if you ask any parent, but besides the point. And C, there's an enormous literature now on what those unique mental and self-developmental impairments are that keep people with autism from having a quality of life. And that is directly connected to the products of the guiding relationship, as the literature says. So we have a literature that says this isn't happening in infants who go on to have autism. We have a literature that says this is essential, this relationship is essential in developing these mental and self abilities. And then we have a literature that says these very same mental and self abilities are those that keep people with autism from having a quality of life. And so the connection is very nice. It's not perfect because nobody's done that research in a sort of conscious way to demonstrate. But even despite the fact that no one's done it consciously, it links up very nicely. Whether you're talking about theory of mind, whether you're talking about executive functioning, whether you're talking about any kind of self-communication, private speech, self-dialogue, whether you're talking about emotional functioning, whether you're talking even about cognitive development, whether you're talking about pragmatic language, whether you're talking about, I just go on, cognitive flexibility, adaptation, all of those things are intrinsically connected, and research shows it, with having this, parent-child guiding relationship. And we can describe what the literature says about that guiding relationship, that it is challenge-based, it's one step ahead based. It's not my term, by the way. That's been used, since Vygotsky. That parents, we show parents intuitively are able to do that in typical development. And that parents are providing scaffolds, they're providing tasks for children and stepping back and, giving children the environment to be able to succeed, to be able to move on. They're doing all those things. They're also in dialogue, having conversations, which, by the way, start in typical development before the second year, where they are teaching children, showing children how to value their prior experience, how to be able to share those experiences, to represent them, to be able to learn from them, to be able to get a sense of self from them, to be able to be aware of their feelings, their internal states, their internal thoughts and ideas and intentions and goals, where all those things are happening in this co-experiencing relationship, right? And so, right, as a consultant guide or guide you to the guide, you're trying to provide the same thing for those parents. I'm trying to provide for you a one-step ahead environment, a place where you can internalize, where you can now develop this way of thinking and using your mind and using the mental tools that you have, helping you develop some new ones, so that you can function in a way to first establish a guiding relationship that hasn't developed normally, which is incredibly important and a difficult feat to do. And then how to use that once you establish it, right? How to use it, maintain it, grow it, because it evolves. It has to evolve. It's not static. It's dynamically evolving. But that's what I'm offering you. And it's an enormous gift, because if we have a guiding relationship, then suddenly we have a mental apprentice, we have a mindful guide, then everything is possible at that point. Not to say everything is going to happen, but things without it, as I say, development is going to be constrained. If we don't develop a guiding relationship, then we know from years and years of literature, of science, that development, the children who don't have it for other reasons, whether they have an abusive relationship, neglected relationship, whatever, those children's development is going to be highly pathological, abnormal, and constrained and limited, regardless of what else you do for them, right? So I think, to me, that you're right, that's the but you see, I think that the first step is to understand the guiding relationship, making sure they do. And then the second step is to transfer that and say, okay, my role with you is going to be to guide you, to be a guide for you, so that you can develop those abilities, those mental ways of thinking, ways of using your intuition, ways of using your feelings, right? Ways you're using your feeling, you're experiencing, your moment-to-moment experiencing, ways of using your reflection, developing knowledge, developing re-experiencing, ways of using your planning, your executive functioning, your planning, your flexibility, ways of using your own self-talk, your own self-dialogue, your own ways of using those dynamic mental capacities to be able to achieve this really critical goal. And that's my role with you. It's not telling you to do X, Y. It's not directing you to do X, Y, and Z. It's not being an instructor. It's not giving you activities, 30 activities to do, right? And people say, well, we need to do that because you're so anxious. Well, to me, I don't think that's the way of managing anxiety. I think giving people hope, helping people to understand the road they're on, helping people get perspective. What we know is when you can help people who are anxious or depressed to take a step back and be in a more global mode, that's the best way of managing it. When you keep them in that detail focus, they're just going to stay anxious. When you help people to take that step back and you give them a perspective and you give them hope. By the way, we have years of research showing this. It's not anything new. Then they feel better. Then they feel less anxious. They feel less depressed. They feel more hopeful and less anxious. We want to give them that perspective. We want to give them a framework for where they're headed, and the idea that, hey, even though we're here right now and these are negative things are happening, we're on the road to something.
Thank you, Dr. Gutstein, and thank you for joining us for ASD, A New Perspective, the podcast show where we help you understand what is going on in the mind of your child, and we continue to encourage you that growth for your child is possible. I'm Kat Lee. See you next time.